William, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, John.
Morning, William.
Just put your question to Mr. Swinney, William.
Okay, Mr. Swinney, I think Scotland is a great country, and I'm sure you would agree with that. But I think we're going through a challenging time, and you probably also agree with that as well. But I also feel that we're a divided country, and part of that is due to political noise. And I'm a bit fed up with the noise of politicians who endlessly debate issues that are a priority for the few, but not the many. I also feel we're in a divided country.
Could you give an example, William, of what you're talking about?
Well, I think the priorities for politicians are things like gender ideology, net zero, but the priorities for people are the bread and butter, education, health, as well as even immigration. So I also, as I said, was saying there, Kay, I feel that the world has changed, and that's because of how we've consumed information. We're consuming it differently now. I'm a member of multiple groups on Telegram. I use X. I follow different people. And while I align with you, John, on certain things, on the idea of independence, but not your particular flavour, I don't align with your worldview on a number of issues. And I actually voted for Brexit, and I would vote for Brexit again. And while there was 1.7 million people who voted to remain in Scotland, there was over 1 million who voted for Brexit. Okay. And so my message to you, and my question is, how are you going to engage with people like me who don't see the world as you see the world? Because I feel demonised with how politicians express themselves in the public discourse, and I feel there must be a better way for us to get to the truth and get along with each other, because at the end of the day, we're all Scottish, John, and we really should do better, I feel.
OK, all right, Mr. Swinney.
Yeah, well, thanks, William, and I actually understand entirely where you're coming from. When I became First Minister, I said that one of my priorities was to try to improve political discourse in Scotland, because I completely agree with you. I think political discourse is now poor, and I was quite open in my acceptance speech in Parliament to acknowledge my contribution to making that political discourse poor, and I have to change that, and I'm going about trying to do that. So part of that is a wee bit challenging, because 2 weeks into my period as First Minister, I've been thrown into an election campaign. Election campaigns are pretty contested spaces, but once I get past this, I want to try to reach out to build an awful lot more agreement in Scotland, to focus on what I think are the big priorities for Scotland. So I set out that there's 4 big themes that will dominate my leadership: eradicating child poverty, stimulating economic growth, improving our public services, and this is perhaps where we part company, successfully delivering the journey to net zero, because we can't escape the climate emergency, William. All the data is staring us in the face. So I want to try to bring people together around about that agenda. Now, I've obviously got a particular view on the Constitution, but I want to avoid that being an impediment to us trying to make some progress on some of these big issues.
The other couple of issues that William mentioned there that doesn't really speak to him was gender ideology, and I know you were questioned on that on Radio 5 Live yesterday. You were asked the question, how many genders are there? And there's been quite a bit of comment as to the hesitation that you had in answering that. I don't know if you're kind of clearer on it now.
Well, there's there are various people take various views about the number of genders that there are, but for me, Parliament passed the gender recognition legislation. The United Kingdom government decided to challenge that, to use their powers to challenge that. It was addressed by the courts, and the courts viewed that the UK government was entitled to do what it did. So your answer is what? Well, I gave the answer yesterday that there were 2 genders, but I recognise there are people that take a different view to